You're tuned in to the Ross Tucker Football Podcast, guiding your gridiron journey, none other than your host, former NFL lineman, Ross Tucker.
Oh, yeah, it is. But it's not just any Ross Tucker Football Podcast. It is a Monster Monday presented by DraftKings. And how about today's guest? We've got the Carolina Panthers' newest analytics genius, Eric Eager, who joined us for an awesome conversation back at the Super Bowl. Everybody will enjoy this, but especially Panthers fans. You're going to get a lot out of this. It's Big Show time.
The Big Show.
All right, so I was not kidding when I told you that I have arguably the best football analytics guy in the world. He certainly probably is the best one that I know. Spent a long time at Pro Football Focus, was their main data guy there. Now he's the vice president of research and development for Sumer Sports. You might remember back in, I think it was January, I did a playoff game with him. Mike Mayock came on the show and was talking about the work he's doing at Sumer Sports with Thomas Dimitroff as well as Eric Eager. You can check Eric out on social media at Eric Eager _. And, for those of you who aren't familiar, all the time he spent at Pro Football Focus, but also played Division II football, right, and has a mathematics degree, which is amazing. By the way, you can't be that good of a data guy if your social media handle is Eric Eager _. Like, that is such a terrible way to end a social media handle, and it's like an extra character. Like, what happened there?
There's like a state there's a state senator in Texas who has the same name as me, and you would be like growing up with a weird name like mine, Eager. It's like that. Everybody's like, how do you pronounce it? It's like, it's the word. It's people used to make fun of me for it, and yet there's another guy with the same spelling, the same exact name. So I had to take that random, Twitter handle because it used to always be PFF _ Eric. That's how it was for all of us. And so when I left PFF, I had to somehow find a name, and I couldn't. I feel like Eric Eager PF or Eric Eager NFL or something like that would have been kind of cliche. So I just put an _. And I think actually funny, like you probably have had Austin Gale, Mike Renner, people that I used to work with. All of us that left PFF put the _ after our names.
That is funny. Similarly, when I first got on Twitter, I was working for Sports Illustrated. I had just retired from the NFL. And they told me you should be on Twitter. I'm like, okay. And I'm glad they did, by the way. It was a good thing to get on it that early. But I was SI _ Ross Tucker because they set it up for me.
Yeah.
They're no dummies, right? So then what happened was when I left Sports Illustrated, I had to change it. And some other guy, he's like a Wall Street financial, like he writes for Yahoo Finance. Ross, he's like 1,500 followers. And his name's Ross Tucker, and he has at Ross Tucker. So I'm at Ross Tucker NFL now. And what's interesting about it is I actually DM'd him one time to be like, hey, man, like, can I buy this from you or something? And he never even got back to me. And I remember thinking, like, how can you be the Yahoo finance guy and you don't even reply to someone? What if I would have given him $10 million? You at least, like, reply to the person, right?
Has he not watched a CBS Sports college football game? Like, does he not know? Like, you're actually pretty, like if he's a red-blooded American male, he has to know who you are.
No, he knows. He knows
okay.
Because, he would reply to people a lot saying, I think because people on a random Monday night, people will DM him or they'll just tag him and say, you're an idiot. Mahomes is the best quarterback I've ever seen. He's like, sir, this is a Yahoo Finance.
Oh, my God.
And then there's a guy that's like a sports scientist in South Africa who's really big on like running shoes and rugby and transgender, Ross Tucker.
Mm-hmm.
And I sit here thinking, I never even heard of another Ross until Friends.
Oh, yeah.
The TV show.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, there's two other like quote unquote public Ross Tuckers. Yep. It's kind of interesting that we're not named after me. So anyway, a bunch of things I want to get to with you. First of all, we've talked about Sumer Sports before because Thomas was on last year and Mike Mayock was on, which is cool. You also have an incredible book you came out with, Football Analytics with Python and R. What the heck does that mean, by the way?
Yes.
Python and R.
So it's funny because, as you said, like, being public, like there's a lot of great analysts in the league, but they're behind, so they can't really like do the things I do, which is like
Right.
tweet out, insights and all that stuff. So I get so many emails from, college students, high schoolers, grad students being like, hey, how do I get in the league? Or even how do I even get started? And so I always felt that there was a lot of people in my background who had always helped me along the way, but I was getting exhausted just like typing these long emails back to people being like, hey, here's some good resources, and so one of my best friends, Richard Erickson, who I had done when I was a professor, he and I had done math papers together. Like we had done research. We have a paper about like the mathematics around windmills, like and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so he was like, why don't we pitch a book idea to O'Reilly? And I'm like, God, I don't have time to do this. But I was like, okay, if I do it and they accept it, I'll do it. And I figured they would say no. And then like 6 hours later, it was like, of course we want a football analytics book. It'll sell like hotcakes. And so, it took about a year and a half. And so we wrote the book. And now when people message me, I'm just like, hey, I have a book. Why don't you go on Amazon and buy it? And it'll get you kind of off the ground there. But yeah, people can go and basically it like takes you from like literally downloading the programs on your computer. There's some really cool open source data, and the NFL data verse and stuff like that, where you can just go in and like literally go in and like look at how good are teams at drafting, how good are quarterbacks at throwing screen passes, and it just goes through building out data visualizations and all that kind of stuff, and gets people off the ground.
I get a bunch of emails too about like broadcasting and stuff. That is amazing to just be able to reply to them and say, it's a great question. You should buy my book.
Yeah,
That's a flex right there.
Yeah.
It's like because what do they say back to that? Like, oh, okay, thank you, and then maybe you get book sales out of it. They should if they really want to do it.
Yeah, well, and I just always felt bad because it was always a prolonged being like, for now, it'd be like, can you just? I would get these LinkedIn messages. And I'd just respond to like 100 of them on a weekend. I'd be like, can you email me back after the draft? Can you email me back after the Super Bowl? And inevitably, like 30% would reply back, but it's still a lot of people to reply to. And you're just you feel bad because all these people are trying to break into this great sport that we all love. And I try to be a part of it as opposed to a gatekeeper. You know what I mean? And it's tough because it's just so. I mean, everybody loves football.
I would tell them they should go ahead and download and watch the Ross Tucker Football Podcast. That's what you should tell them now.
Yeah.
So I did want to ask you, like, where are we at now with data in football? Has there been a lot of progress the last year or two? Are we where we were? And what would you say right now are the strengths and weaknesses? Obviously, it came up a bunch in the playoffs, in particular with the Detroit Lions. And I actually wrote a column for the 33rd team that, you better get used to teams going for it on fourth down in situations that make you a little uncomfortable.
Yep.
Because I feel like that's going to be the new norm. Like I even said, even just Conference Championship Sunday, I'm on the sideline for Ravens-Chiefs, right?
Yep.
Chiefs, the first drive, 4th and 2,
Yep.
They go for it. And, Mahomes comes all the way back to his like third read to Kelsey. Incredible play, right? And then the Ravens went for it a couple times in situations where I thought, boy, they wouldn't normally do that back in the day. Like, it has changed. I think what the Eagles did in 2017 that felt revolutionary and I think contributed greatly to their success that year, I think slowly but surely, I feel like that's almost becoming the new norm.
Yeah, you get ebbs and flows of it, right? So in 2016, if you looked at the models, no teams in the NFL went for fourth downs more than half the time when the model said they should. So that was like a big turning point was in 2017, Doug Peterson, he empowered the math guys and said, like, look, I'm going to actually do what you say sometimes. And the biggest part was they had success. They made like 60 or 70% of those fourth downs, including that Super Bowl when, obviously the Philly special was a big play, but then the play to Zach Ertz when they were trailing in that game and, needed a first down big. That helped. But then we've had ebbs and flows. We had the Ravens, who are a really good analytics team in 2019, fail on all those fourth downs against the Titans in 2019. And they, that set it back. And then Brandon Staley, against the Raiders and against the Chiefs and, was really doing a lot of good stuff with fourth downs. But ultimately, I think set the thing back a little bit because the next like frontier is like, what plays are you going to call? Because you can have the 2-point conversion plays, you can have the fourth downs, you can have, the understanding that you should be going for it here, but do you have the plays that you're confident in? Because to me, and you probably know this as well as anybody as a player, but it's also what you expect, right? Because as a player, you know that like the confidence is worth what? 2 to 5, 5 to 10%. And so if I'm telling you, like, yeah, there's a 5% edge in going for it on fourth down here, but if you're like, yeah, but my coordinator doesn't have a call, like that erases the whole edge, right? And so I think that that's kind of the next frontier is like, and that's what I love so much about the Detroit Lions is you got Penei Sewell going to bat for his coach. You got, Jared Goff and Ben Johnson are best friends. And even though it didn't work out for them, we measured at Sumer that through going for fourth downs, Dan Campbell added a win to the Detroit Lions team. You're talking about a team that hadn't won a playoff game in 32 years. Well, it was going to take math and science and all this stuff to get them over the hump. And I think that Detroit was so effective at it over the course of the year because their players bought into it. When it was 3rd and 7 and they ran the ball, they knew it was to set up 4th and 2. And they knew it was to actually, use all 4 downs, as opposed to like if you're a team that doesn't go for fourth down that much and your coordinator is like, all right, we're going for it here. And you're all kind of like, what the hell? It takes away a little bit of that edge.
So I'm glad you brought that up because that was one of the questions that I had as it related to the Lions in particular. So what I think what bothers me about it, and I'm not nearly as well versed in it as you are, but like it's almost like people think that there is this analytics Bible that all of the teams are reading from the same thing. And that's not the case. So my question, and I don't know that we'll ever get the answer to this, and I don't think the Lions would tell us, right? So, like, let's say the first one where they went for it, 4th and 2 at the 28, 7 minutes remaining in the third quarter, they're up by 14. Does their model just say 4th and 2 at the 28 is a go? Does it say 4th and 2 at the 28 is a go because our kicker is average at best from the 40s? Does it take into account that there's 7 minutes left in the third quarter? Does it take into account that it would be a 3-score game if he makes it? Like what I'm curious about is how much is really inputted into the model that drives these decisions, and is it that, or is it mainly Dan Campbell saying, hey man, this is who we are. We're aggressive. We're going to go for it. This is our mindset. And by the way, that's okay too. You can make an argument there, but I think I'd rather prefer being told the more information is input in the model, the better, and that it's a smarter model.
Yeah. So yes is the answer, right? So if for a Lions team, they have. Like all the models will say it's 4th and 2 from the 28. There's this much time left. We are 7-point underdogs. The total in the game is this, right? Because you have to have the context. If it's Army Navy, right, and the total on the game is 27.5 and the spread is 2.5, there's only 8 possessions in the game. So if you punt it, you're not going to get that many. That's in the algorithm, right? So whereas if if you're a big favorite, you might kick the ball more because you know that you may be able to get a stop better. Or, if you're Kansas City, the Kansas City basically turtled the whole second half of the Ravens game because their defense is amazing. All of those are inputted into the model, and the kicker strength is inputted in the model for teams. Now, the public models are a little bit less sharp, but they're still, for all of them, team strengths are involved. So the big thing is like if you're an underdog, you should be going for it more, and that's in every single model.
So I want to clarify something because I've heard, like on the Even Money Betting podcast, my co-host Steve Fezzik, he talks a lot about decision making based on whether you're the favorite or the underdog. Yep. I've never heard that a team takes that into account. You're saying that they do. So tell me, so these teams, like the Lions model for their game against the Niners in the NFC Championship, it took into account that they were 7-point underdogs.
Yeah, well, they might not think they're 7-point underdogs, but their internals will say we're underdogs somehow. It won't say Vegas or the markets say we're 7, but they might say we're underdogs by 6.7 points based on our offense, our defense, their offense, their defense, and so then that changes the complexion of the game, right? Because if you are, if you're an underdog to a team like the Niners and you punt to them, you might never see it again. Whereas if you're favorites to a team like, the Cardinals and you kick it to them, you're going to see the ball again in all likelihood. So, like, those things are going to change what the calculus is.
So, okay, I want your opinion then, in particular, on the first one by the Lions. Because the way I look at it is, even if they got that one, Eric, and by the way, Reynolds dropped the pass. It was right in his hands, right?
Yeah.
They should have got it. But there's still a pretty good chance that the drive ends with them kicking a field goal at that point, and they go up by 3 scores again. I guess my argument was, even if the best thing happens and they convert and they go down and they get a touchdown, it's still a 3-score game. So in my mind, and tell me where I'm wrong, you're better at this stuff than I am, but the upside of being up 21 versus being up 17 is not worth the downside of only being up 14 and not 17. And by the way, that assumes the kicker makes it, which is a big assumption, which I hate the take the points thing. You can't, anybody says take the points is wrong.
Yeah. Well, but also you might take 3 more minutes off the clock, because that was the biggest thing for me.
That's what I wondered too.
Yeah, like for me, it's more the thing about football that's changed now. When you've watched, like you do the betting, like totals in this league have been a joke, right? The games go under, and they don't go under. They go under in Patrick Mahomes games. They don't even go. They don't go under because the quarterbacks all suck. They go under in Lamar Jackson games. They go under. And the reason is there's not that many possessions anymore. Teams are just as good now at picking up first downs. They're not as good at scoring touchdowns as they used to be, because these defenses are playing those
better
too
in
high
the red zone and the too high shell.
Yeah. So if you're thinking about, in this league, there's such a premium on possession, right? Because you're not going to get big plays. So if you're the Lions, it's not just 14 to 17 to 21. It's 14, and even if you go down and miss a 4th and 1 at the 1 yard line, you've taken 3 more minutes off the clock. And when you're up on a team like the Niners that is actually explosive, your goal is to take more time off the clock. And that, to me, that's even the secondary benefit that I think a lot of us, when we think about the immediacy of it, we miss, because the control of the clock is the big part. And when you have the ball, you control the clock so much better. And we saw that in the Lions Rams game earlier, where McVay lost all of his timeouts. And so the Lions had the ball at the end of the game. And even though the Rams had kind of all the momentum, it's like, well, McVay can't really do anything because he doesn't have timeouts. And the Lions, as much as they're uphill the rest of this game, they have the ball. And there's not much you can do.
So did you like both decisions by Campbell?
I liked, and
it's interesting because the first one, I talked to a data analyst for a team, and he thought the second one in the fourth quarter, going for it, was the right decision, because your goal is to win the game, not to tie it. And even if you kick the field goal and he makes it,
best case scenario,
you're tied, and you haven't been able to stop the Niners all half. So he thought the first one, his calculus was the Niners will probably only get 4 possessions at that point. Gibbs fumbled, which changed it a little bit, right? But the Niners will only get 4 possessions. If you can kick this field goal and go up 3 possessions again, that's pretty good.
I think if you have a better than league average kicker, it changes it. But I don't, he never kicked outdoors until that game for that team. So I still was okay with it. And they schemed up a play where the wide receiver was wide open. So I just have a hard time being all that upset. And the other part to me is, from your perspective, you're Penei Sewell, right? And the whole year, he's trusted you to get that.
Yeah.
And again, this is me being as a mathematician talking as trying to talk as a football player. But
I get it.
The whole year, your rough and tumble coach has told you, I believe in you, I believe. And then he's going to throw a soccer player out there and a 4th and 2 when you're winning by 4.
Dude, now you're speaking my language.
You know what I'm saying? I don't get. That's the part where I'm that's why I love Dan Campbell, because he stands at a podium. He takes complete accountability for the whole thing, right? Whereas I think sometimes some of these coaches, they pass it off to the kicker because if he misses it, that was his fault, And you remember what game was it? It was the Colts Texans to go to win the to go to the playoffs, and he called a great play, and Gardner Minshew throws the ball behind the running back. It's incomplete. And Steichen did a great job this year, but he goes to him, he's like, that's on you. And I'm like, I want my coach, I want my coach to take accountability like that,
So I got to ask you one more thing. Please tell me, as a guy that played at a pretty high level, and people know that like Division II football is so much better than people realize. It's not even funny. Like, I know the guys that play in the PSAC in Pennsylvania. That is good football. Please tell me you're not a momentum doesn't exist guy.
Yeah, I just don't think we can quantify it. So it's really hard.
But Eric, like the second half, the Lions, I've never seen a team pee down their leg like that. It was painful
but
to watch.
Here's a question that I have then, because we're even missing the 1 4th down that I think is a great conversation then, because the end of the half, would you have kicked the field goal?
Absolutely, because I don't think you get the benefit of, if you don't get it, having them pinned deep.
Okay.
And I think you got to go up 3 scores there.
So here's my response though in the other direction. So because I agree, I think it was very defensible to kick the field goal. But from momentum, if we're going to use momentum, here's the momentum standpoint. You make it, you're up 21. 21 is a comfortable enough lead where you can start to think about,
clock
management. 14 isn't. And I want to go into the half. If I'm up 14, I'm just having a different conversation with my team, right? I'm like, they got the ball to start the half. It's 2 scores. They're the best team in the NFL. It's a different combo. 17 feels safe enough to relax, but not safe enough to win. And like when they kicked that field goal, I was kind of like, thinking about it from a momentum standpoint, I was a little worried because they came out and you saw it. They were pretty kind of lackadaisical in the second half of that game. And that's the only reason I would have gone for it, because a miss actually alerts my team and says, this game isn't over. Whereas 17 to me feels like 3, because you're talking about 3 scores. You talked about it a bunch of times. And I think players are like, we're going to win this football game.
See, that's funny to me, because in my mind, you go for it and you don't get it, then you've lost momentum.
Yeah.
Because you kick the field goal, you're keeping the momentum going. You go for it and don't get it, you lose momentum. You got to check him out on social media, at @EricEager_. That's the best way you can find out all the amazing stuff he's got going on at Sumer Sports. SumerSports.com, SUMER sports.com. And, of course, this incredible book for those of you watching us on YouTube or DK Network, Football Analytics with Python and R, learning data science through the lens of sports. Eric, thanks so much for coming on the show,
Hey,
man.
Ross,
Really
thanks for
appreciate
having me, man.
All right.
Man, I love that conversation with Eric. Such a smart dude. Love that almost as much as I love Labatt Blue Light and drinking them with my friends, family over the weekend, living life to the power of we. Always enjoy responsibly. Beer, Labatt USA, Buffalo, New York.
Tuck's Takes.
All right, Ross. The Patriots, they officially hire Elliott Wolf as their new executive vice president of player personnel.
Gonna make this the Meaty Monday today, Jack. Presented by GoodRanchers.com, America's best meat delivered to your door. Use code Ross for 15% off, a better way to buy meat at GoodRanchers.com. I don't think I've ever seen a 4-13 team so committed to promoting from within or doing things differently, right? Like they promote Gerard Mayo without interviewing any other head coaching candidates. They promote Elliott Wolf with struggling even to get some external candidates and not even naming him the GM. I don't know if it's a compliment to Belichick because he had Gerard Mayo and Elliott Wolf already in place, or it's the Patriots saying everything else is fine here. Belichick was the problem.
Some other roster moves. Cardinals, they signed wide receiver Zay Jones. The Texans, they trade for Rams wide receiver Ben Scarani. And the Giants, they signed wide receiver Allen Robinson.
Big wide receiver weekend since our last show on Thursday. Zay Jones visited like 5 different teams before signing sort of a pedestrian contract. I thought that was interesting. Definitely good opportunity for him there in Arizona. Skoranek actually got traded for something minimal value, but some value. A lot of value in my mind to a number 4 receiver like Skoranek who will block and will battle on special teams, especially with the new kickoff rule. I love that signing by the Texans. Giants signing Allen Robinson, man, he kind of fell off a cliff. I don't know what happened there. Also, I saw where the Chargers signed Bud Dupree. to a 2-year, $10 million deal. The edge rusher, trying to get some more edge rush there, not knowing what the deal is with Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa. Other than that, I think we're done here.
Thanks for tuning in to the Ross Tucker Football Podcast. Make sure to also check out Even Money, Fantasy Feast, and College Draft, all on the DraftKings Network on Samsung TV Plus, YouTube, or subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform.
Shout out myfrontpagestory.com. I don't know what to tell you other than it's too late. It's too late for Mother's Day. You blew it. You should have gotten them an awesome gift for Mother's Day from myfrontpagestory.com. Although we're a month away from Father's Day, and your dad loves the newspaper. Backofficeschedule.com, steakhousesports.com, humanheadnyc.com, Sporticulture, Pizza Boy Brewing.